Warm-ups are a fantastic tool to utilize inside of your classroom, especially in upper elementary. Why do we use them? Well, because it's a great management tool and it's also a really fantastic instructional practice that we can be implementing. But how can we effectively implement these warm-ups where we're supporting the needs of all of our students? In this video, I want to share with you what warm-ups are, how you can be utilizing them inside of your classroom, and I'm going to give you 3 warm-ups that you can turn around and implement into your classroom tomorrow. Okay, so let's stop and think a little bit about warm-ups. Why do we use warm-ups? Well, one, it's a great management tool. It's a management tool in that it provides your students with something to do as soon as they come into your classroom. You don't have to immediately get up to the front of the board and start teaching, so you have a little bit of wiggle room as kids are either asking you questions, they're coming to you with devices, they're handing you papers, you're dealing with various transition needs. So it's a great management tool in that sense. The second reason that we want to use warm-ups is that it provides our students with an opportunity to be able to switch their brains from the content that they were learning previously. So for example, if they were just in a math class, they're going to come to you, but their brains are still thinking math. So it typically takes our brains about 15 to 20-ish minutes to be able to really focus in on the specific task that you're going to be working on. So a warm-up is a great opportunity to allow your students that chance to focus in on the content that you're going to be learning for that day in that specific class period. So it gives them a little bit of brain switching time. The other reason that we do this is because it's a great instructional practice. It allows us to really hit the needs of all of our students depending on what they specifically need as far as instruction. So one of the things that we have found that a lot of teachers are using are called bell ringers, right? And what's so great about a bell ringer is that it's easy. It's something that you can print, you can have out on their table, it is ready to go, and you don't have to think about it. However, bell ringers are really not going to serve your students in the way that you need to serve them. One of the pieces that a lot of teachers will say, well, it's spiraling instruction. Yes, that's good and great. However, if it's spiraling grade level instruction on things that you have not taught about, you're going to start to see a lot more behaviors come about because the students don't understand the content. And you can't front load an entire year's worth of content in order to support your students with just warm-ups. And so I want to encourage you that as we go through and start talking and looking at some various warm-ups, that you're really thinking about how can you tailor this instruction to fit the needs of your students. And so a great example of this is going to be a class that I had a previous year. And this class really struggled when it came to encoding, decoding, and also vocabulary. And so instead of providing them with lots of readings and organizations and just comprehension questions, I focused a lot of my warm-ups on that encoding, decoding vocabulary piece. So on Mondays, we would do syllabication. On Tuesdays, I would have them do morphology. On Wednesdays, we would do shades of meaning. On Thursdays, we would have a mentor sentence that we would kind of dig through. And that really helped to support my students where they specifically needed it the most. Whereas in other years, I might have focused my warm-ups on more of that instructional comprehension piece, where they would have more task cards or comprehension questions, or they were organizing information and synthesizing information in a different way. And that was because they specifically needed that area. So tailoring your warm-ups can be really, really beneficial. And I promise you, it doesn't take as long as you think it's going to take. So long as you set up a system and a routine, you're going to be golden here. And so I want to give you 3 very simple warm-ups that you can take back into your classroom and start using immediately. Okay? So let's go ahead. We're going to get into the very first warm-up. Okay, so the first warm-up that we're going to be looking at is called Shades of Meaning. Now, with Shades of Meaning, I do have resource, like papers for them. So here's what I end up doing. Shades of meaning, the entire premise behind this activity is that they're looking at vocabulary terms that are in the same shade, right? You think of 50 shades, 50 shades of gray, or, you know, shades of purple or shades of blue, whatever you want to think about it. It's just like different shades. They all have very similar meanings, but they're just slightly different. So if I'm looking at these words that we have up here, we have the word annoyed, frustrated, irritated, angry, furious, outraged. All of this has to do with a negative emotion, right? They all have the same shade of meaning. And so what students then have to do is categorize this and be able to discuss what has the least to what has the most. Okay, and you can organize it however you choose to organize it. If you want to reverse it, you're welcome to reverse it. So what I do is I place my students into pairs or into small groups, typically no more than 3. And I will provide them with sheets of paper that each have one of the terms on there. And so I will give them, I will set a timer, and then students will work in their groups to place these where they believe which one has the least emotion to which one has the most emotion as far as this goes, okay? And so as students are working, I'm walking around and I'm kind of pulling information. I'm getting them to think about it, and I'm just kind of getting them having a conversation about it. And so once we're done, I then am able to have students come up and we have a conversation about which one is going to be the least to which one's the most. And normally I will start with the least. I will say, okay, which one do you think has the least emotion possible? So if we're looking at this, students might end up saying, frustrated. Frustrated is definitely just going to be the least, because there are times where I'm frustrated, but it's not a super big deal, right? And then I would say, okay, so now if everybody agrees, and I would allow students to have a conversation as far as groups where everybody would get to debate. And if we have people who believe that there might be one that they think is different, maybe they say, irritated. Actually, this group believes that it might be irritated. I will just kind of create two of these columns as we work through so that we can compare and contrast them. And then it kind of continues. So they might end up saying, actually, you know, outraged is going to be the one that is the most. So we're going to put that up at the top, and they both agree on that. So we're good. And so this would allow them to be able to have a conversation. We discuss the meanings of each of these words, and it encourages my students to be able to use them inside of the classroom. And so what's really nice is that I then started to notice that students were able to, one, identify these in their readings, which was important. They were able to discuss the meaning as far as it went in their context of their readings, but then it also allowed them to incorporate this more into their writing, which is also an area where I really wanted them to be able to develop some of those skills in. So this activity is simple. You can have a template where you're able to just pull out some of these words and then just print them out. You can go ahead and have several weeks of these. Like I said, every single week I would have the same routine. So I would do one of these a week. Now, you're probably sitting here saying, oh my gosh, Bridget, I don't have the time, nor do I want to try to find the shades of meaning for all these words. It's okay, because one of the things that I do want to tell you is that currently right now, my community for Bridging Literacy is open. And so it is going to be closing very, very soon. And on top of that, the price is going to end up going up. So if you opt into the community right now, you can actually get an entire year's worth of the Shades of Meanings activities already ready for you to just print and use inside of your classroom, along with some of the other activities that I'm showing you. So if any of these resources just like tickle your fancy and you're like really excited about it and you want to use it, go and check out the community, see some of the things that we have to offer for you, because it might be an area where you are really excited and you want to start implementing some of these pieces. So you can get all of those instantly. Okay, so we would then continue that conversation with students as far as building it out and what they believed goes inside of the menu. Again, what's really nice is that this is a very conversational piece. It gave me a little bit of time for students to come in, to kind of look at the words as a group, to be able to have a discussion for them, and then they were immediately able to then start to have a conversation and practice those. Shades of meaning, fantastic activity to use in your classroom. Okay, so the second activity that I have for you is going to be a word matrix, or word matrices if we're going to utilize the plural form of this. And so a word matrix is a morphology tool. And what that does is it allows you to look at the smallest units of words. And so we're really looking at the affixes and the base words of any form of a word, and we're being able to pull them together, looking at connotation, looking at all of the different combinations. How does it end up changing the meaning of some of these words? But one of the things that I ended up finding with this activity is that it really helped my students when it came to blending words, being able to read multisyllabic words, which was really important, especially for a bulk of my students who are really struggling with that component. And it also helped with that vocabulary piece. And so every week we would have one that I would just post up. Now, this activity is a little bit easier for you to just kind of let your students go as soon as they come into the classroom, whereas the shades of meaning, it's going to require a little bit more work on your part because you have to put them into groups unless they're already grouped at their tables, or you can have them do that individually, but this is going to be a lot of things for you to have to, pull out and be able to make for all of your students inside of your classroom. Now, if you want to do that and you want to have individual ones of these for your students, absolutely go ahead to do it. I would even encourage you to make them smaller so that way they can even cut them out and put them into a notebook if they have like a writer's notebook. That could be a really fun way to incorporate some of that, but that seems like a lot of work. And I am not one for that. But what's nice about this activity is that students can come in, you can go ahead and have it up, you can get them into this routine. Now, obviously, I would encourage you to do like 1 to 2, maybe even 3 of these together as a class first before you just let them go, because students will look at this and they will say, nope, I'm not doing it. So here's what I had my students do. They would come into the classroom and they would take out their dry erase boards and a dry erase marker, and I would set a timer and encourage them to create as many words as possible. So the way that this works is that you will have prefixes that are going to come up here. Sometimes you're also going to have base words here, so it's going to develop like compound words. And then you're going to have some of your suffixes that are back here in the very back. And so what students will do is they will start to put these all together. So I can say plays, I can say playing, I can say replay, I can say replays. And you can just constantly look for some of those combinations. What's really nice is that not all of these combinations are going to work, right? So some of these are not really going to make up real words. So having that conversation with students about, wait a second, is that actually a real word? And it built up a lot of really great just conversation and collaboration with all of my students. So I would put the timer on, and then they would brainstorm and list out all the words that they had. Now, my kids got very competitive with this because they all wanted to see how many they got and who got the most words. So they would be writing their words down. So I could say replays. I would say playing. I would say plays. Player, and played. Like the list goes on and on and on. So once I gave my students that opportunity to make their list on their boards, we then came together and had a conversation about the words. So because I had this smart board inside of my classroom, which now I have one inside of my home, but when my students would come up, they would then be able to move and manipulate each of these pieces. So they would come here and they would say, and they would say play. And I think if I actually hit you in presentation mode, You're going to see it just a little. Plays. And so we would just build words. Now here's the catch. As my students were building words and they would raise their hands and they would come up and they would kind of add, or I would just manipulate it myself, they would then cross it off one time. Okay, so they would just cross it off if they did it and they got it correct. If they did not, they would have to erase it from their board. So if they came up with a word that just didn't absolutely made no sense whatsoever, they would erase it off their board. They would get to count how many they ended up having. But then we would then read them. And this would build in that fluency piece that my students also needed. So we would say replay, unplay, plays, player, playing, playful, playfulness. Like we would immediately just start to read the words. And one of the most magical things happened from this activity. I had a student who was a learning support student. He raised his hand and he said, "Ms. Beckman, I can read the big words." And it absolutely broke my heart, almost took me to tears because he was able to read the words. And it was because we had gone over each of these pieces where he saw the differences between them. And it really encouraged them and to feel like confident readers at the end of the day. And more than anything, every single day you want your students to leave your classrooms feeling as though that they have been a successful reader. And this is one of the ways that you can definitely implement this into your classroom. And then you can have a conversation about, connotation. How does it end up changing for re or un? You have kind of that negative piece that's in there. And so it's just a great conversation to have with your students. And again, if this is something that you are interested in, the community has an entire year's worth of these that you can just put them up through a PowerPoint and then share them with your students and have them practice these all year long. Okay, so let's get into the final one that I have for you. Now, this one is going to be a task card. Now, notice that this is not a normal task card because it's a very short little passage, but these are task cards that I have created and used inside of my membership. And so what I do with my students on this is that they will read the passage, and sometimes I will give it to them as their individual task cards. You can have them pasted into their writer's notebooks, and then I would ask them to organize information in some way. So as they read, I would give them that time, they would read, and again, make sure it's something you've already gone over. So for this one, it's text structures. Now, typically when I would start doing this task card is when I am moving into main idea and key details. I've already taught text structures to my students. They have an understanding of this before I ever give it to them because I know that they're going to be confident in it so long as I provide the supports to where I need to provide supports for those students who need it. So let's say I pass this out. I've already taught it. We're on main idea and key details, like in our general lessons. So I wanted to review text structures with them because we're going to utilize text structures to help us define the main idea and the key details of each of these passages. And so I would provide my students with their task cards. They could either do it in groups. You can have them do it independently, like I said, and put it into their notebooks. Or you could do it as an entire class. It's up to you. Provide them time to read it and then have a conversation. And again, going back to that support piece, if you have students who need supports and you can provide them with what the text structure is, you can provide them with an organizer, you can give pieces to them to support them and help them feel confident in this process. So in this one, it's about sweet tooth. It's about eating too much sugar and what sugar ends up doing to your body. And so this is a cause and effect. And so as I would end up talking with my students about this, I then might start saying, okay, well, what are some of the things that we're noticing? And so we would have a conversation about what it would look like. So for example, too much sugar can cause mass changes. So if I come over here, I would then say, so here is our cause, and then here is the effects. So what are some of those things that happen because of eating too much sugar? If eating too much sugar So eating too much sugar is our cause. What happens because of that? And we can identify things. So here you're gonna have weight gain, you're gonna feel tired, it's gonna help make your skin break out. We could then list these here and organize that information. And so again, you can have your students do this with partners. You can give them a construction paper or just a printer paper that they would do this on, or you could just have them do it on a whiteboard if you wanted to. And then you would then have that conversation as an entire class on what that ended up looking like. So what's nice about this is that because this task card is so simple, it's very quick. It's going to give them the practice, and then when I move into my lesson that I'm going to be teaching about main idea and key details, I might have a passage or make sure that it matches what I'm teaching. So let's say my mentor text is all about causes and effect. Okay, cause and effect. Well, I'm gonna say, hey guys, remember when we talked about cause and effect during our warm-up? If we think back to that, that's gonna really help to support us when we're identifying the main idea and details. So let's think about the text structure of this mentor text, and we can identify that. And so this can then transition you into your main lesson, which is gonna be really, really helpful because it allows your students to make connections. And that's one of the things that we have to really build for our kids when it comes to the brain, is developing that connection, that interface where they're seeing how things relate to one another, because then they're gonna start synthesizing information. They're gonna start kind of seeing it as a whole and understanding how they're utilizing that in the future versus isolating those individual skills. So these are going to be the 3. So as a reminder, we have simple task cards that you can use. You could do it on text structures, main idea. You could do it on character traits. You could do it on plot. You can do it on conflict. There are so many possibilities when it comes to task cards, and you can use any task cards that you have available. You also have the ability to do a word matrix, which will encourage you to look at vocabulary, and it's also going to help your students with encoding and decoding and just understanding words. And then you have shades of meaning, which is also going to help benefit your students when it comes to vocabulary usage, understanding it in context, and then being able to relate it back into their reading and writing. So hopefully you have really enjoyed this quick little talk about warm-ups and how we can be utilizing them inside of the classroom. I am so curious, are you ready to just ditch those bell ringers, those printable pages, and really start looking at authentic ways that you can be embedding these inside of your classroom? One other thing that I want to mention before I let you guys go, and this is important, so don't leave me, is that if you are very interested in learning more about warm-ups, currently right now, I also have access to the Writing Bridge, which is going to be a writing course that provides you with individual lessons. It's going to take you through the understanding the writing process, the writing rope, and looking at the genres of writing and how they really differ. It's going to really support you in every way possible as a writing teacher, so you're not feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and making sure that your students are really growing as writers. But in there, one of the bonuses that I give you is I provide lots of warm-ups when it comes to being able to implement them into your classrooms. And also all of these resources are available inside of the Bridging Literacy community. I'm going to leave links to both of those so that you can go and check those out. But please know that the Writing Bridge is open and available all year long. The community is closing very, very soon, and prices are going to be going up on that as well. Okay, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and talking about warm-ups. It's one of the areas that I'm really, really passionate about. Don't forget to give this video a like. It really does help me to get this out to other teachers out there, and I will catch you all next time. Bye.